So the first one that I have here is a very nice question. So I'm going to be very selective based on how I do the questions because I want your brain, right? That's the first secret, in fact, towards mastering mathematics, particularly when you're interested in getting a distinction, right? You have to understand what you need to work with, right? You need to know what is in paper one, and you also need to know what is in paper two. You can't confuse the topics. Of course, anything can be asked anyway. You could be doing paper one and I start throwing concepts from paper two's concepts, right? You can throw something from there. But you have to have a general understanding, a clear mind of what is important as far as paper one is concerned. So that's the first thing that I want to share with you, right? So what I'm going to do here, before I even start with the questions, because I want to use the fact that you guys are sending me those questions to try and also share these techniques and the secret with you. So here we're going to have what I call the recipe, right? We will put here our recipe, right, of getting a distinction. Recipe of a distinction in mathematics, because I know you're very much interested. And remember this, guys, it doesn't matter what has happened before. It doesn't matter what has happened before, whether you missed school for a couple of weeks. You are matrix. If you're a grade 12 learner and you're watching this program, you must know that we are definitely going to give you an exam that covers all concepts. We're not going to trim anything for matrix. Matrix are going to write a fully blown paper. So you have to make sure that you cover all the basics, right? Now, the first thing that I want to share with you is that you've got to know, right? And I'm going to keep coming back to this page, right? Know what the enemy, right, has prepared for you. Know what the enemy has prepared for you, right? This is very important. Why am I saying this? Well, most of you don't know which concepts fall under paper one and which concepts fall under paper two. In this context, the enemy that I'm talking about is the examiners, right? The examiners, right, have a couple of things that they need to examine you on under paper one, which is what we are interested in on this particular show. So first of all, I want you to understand the following. You guys are going to be going to, it's like a war, right? When you're fighting them, you've got to know what your enemy has prepared, right? What your enemy has strategized in this battle, right? And one of the things that you need to know is the battle is going to go on for 150 marks, right? This is very important. It's going to go for 150 marks and it's going to happen for exactly 3 hours. Somebody's wondering, what does that mean? Well, that implies that for every mark, right, for every mark that you see on every paper, you've got exactly 1 minute and 12 seconds to finish off answering that particular question, right? It's not a complicated thing. It's very simple and very, very fundamental. You guys, some of you don't finish the exams, particularly in accounting and other topics or other subjects, right? So the important thing that you need to understand is managing your time. This is about helping you with paper one revision. We're interested in making sure that you understand how do you position yourself, what is important and what is not important. And one of the most important things is time management. So you're going to be writing for 150 marks for 3 hours. That means 1 mark equals 12 seconds, 1 minute and 12 seconds. So don't spend over a minute on a question that is just for a mark. So 2 marks, 2 minutes, and so when you get to those questions like 5 marks questions, you can be able to do it and finish it without actually any problems, because it is as long as it takes for a song, a typical song to play. You can't tell me that you will not be able to solve a question while the song is playing, right, until the song is finished. You guys need to know how to work with those kind of things, right? So the question that I'm going to be looking at, one of the things that I'm going to be paying attention to is time management. It tells me how much effort do I need to put on a particular question. If they say 1 mark, I know it's a 1-line question. It should be straightforward. The advice I give my learners, I say to them, always take the marks that you see and divide by 2 if you want to know how much time you need to spend on a question. So if a question is 1 mark, I tell them don't spend over 30 seconds, because if you succeed to do that for the rest of the paper, that means when you proceed to finish, when you are done in fact with the paper, you'll realize that you've got 30 minutes extra that you can use to double check wherever you might have made mistakes and go through any of the things that you could have struggled with, maybe that you jumped in previous questions, right? So very important for you to make sure if it's a marks, half the time, right? Half that. Just take the number of marks, divide by 2 to know how much time you're required to spend on it. Okay, cool. All right, the other thing that I want you to pay attention to, right, before we proceed to the first question, is what are the subtopics that are under there, right? Number 1, you are definitely going to start working with what we call algebra as the first thing that is going to be happening there. And this is going to be for approximately 25 marks. It's important, very, very important to know what is under paper 1 and what is under paper 2. It is embarrassing as a math learner not to know the topics that are examined in paper 1 and those that are examined in paper 2. The next topic that you need to worry about is what we call sequence and series, right? Which some of you call number pattern, sequence and a series, right? And when you get to sequence and series, it is also approximately 25 marks. We are going to examine you here on an arithmetic pattern, a quadratic pattern, and a geometric pattern, as well as concepts of sigma notation and maybe conversions and diversions. Those kind of things like sum to infinity are going to definitely be in every exam. You can't run away from them. And they're done already. You should be knowing them. The next thing that you need to worry about is what we call graphs or functions and inverses, right? Functions and inverses is what is going to be on the paper. This is the blueprint that examiner comes with when they're coming to this particular battle, and I want you to know that so that you can be able to work strategically when you're working with these things and understand what you need to know. And of course, you can obviously use this to weigh yourself to see if you are actually ready for any exam. Right? So functions and inverses will weigh around 35 marks in total. This is basically one of the topics that have got most of the marks. And then the next thing that you'll need to worry about is what we call financial math, right? And financial math is very, very exciting because it's not complicated, but it's just worth about 15 marks. Just because it's word problems here, you guys struggle a lot with this also, but because you're watching today's program, we're gonna make sure that you understand how to work with that. And then the second last topic that you need to worry about is what we've been working on in the past few weeks, which is what we call differential calculus, right? I could have just written calculus on this. You also need to know that this is going to run for about 35 marks or so. And the last thing that is going to be on your paper one exam paper all the time is going to be what we call probability, the concepts of probability, right? Probability. Right. This is also about 15 marks or so. So in total, this is how your paper one looks for 150 marks in total, which is something that you need to actually work on for exactly 3 hours. Now, if you don't know these kinds of things, it becomes a bit more challenging for you to know what is actually important and what is not important, how ready are you for the exam, and maybe if you need help in any of these topics, right? It is actually more inspiring when you come to me and you're asking for assistance, then I ask you, where do you need help in? And you tell me, well, I've got a problem with functions. And to be exact, I don't know how to find the defining equation if a graph such as a quadratic function is sketched for me. That's better than somebody coming to you and saying, I've got a problem in math. You ask, what's the problem? They say everything, right? Then that actually prevents me from being able to help you. I don't even know where to begin trying to assist you to understand what is going on. So this structure is how your enemy is preparing, right, in this particular battle. And we want you guys to know this all the time. You can even see if you are struggling with some of the concepts. For example, before you even move on or before you go to any exam, just check all these things, tick them, check. Algebra, am I covered? If I'm not covered, take your textbook and take our Tenfold education app, go through all the basics that we have there. We've got, in a very nice way, summarized videos that help you to understand these concepts on that particular app, the Tenfold education app. Use the app and then your textbook, and then you go through all those topics and those concepts. You read there, you try to make sure you cover up all those basics. When you are done with everything, then you move on to the next topic, right? This is the only way you'll be able to get a distinction in math. There's more things that I'm going to be sharing with you, but this one is mostly important. Don't know a little bit of this here and a little bit of this here and a little bit of that somewhere else. That's the problem that you guys have. You know something here and something else there and something else. You have to have a complete understanding of a topic, of a concept, fully understand the concept before you can move on to start revising or start working on another topic. So very important for you to keep that in mind. So I hope you guys have already covered a lot of the things that we spoke to you about over the past few weeks on the shows that we had. And on today's show, we're going to just be consolidating everything that we've worked on, and we're going to help you to understand how do you do math paper one in a way that will help you to get a distinction. Right, so let me go to the first question that you sent to us, which, like I said, I'm going to select them in a particular way in the order that they appear in the final exam. We're going to keep visiting that recipe page and keep showing you more and more things that you need to know. So this question is a question one, of course. It's algebra, which is the very first question you should expect in every paper one exam paper. And it says the following: solve for x. We're expecting that. We're going to get a quadratic question. We're going to get a quadratic inequality. We're going to get a simultaneous question. You might get laws of exponents and sets, and you will get nature of roots. Right, let's have fun. Okay, so on the first one, we are required to solve for x, of course, and it says solve for x. So we're going to be quick on this one because we don't teach this in grade 12, but you will definitely get it in every exam that you guys have to work with, right? Okay, cool. So it's actually x squared plus 5x plus, it's not plus, but it actually appears as a minus 6 here, right? the minus 6 is equal to 0 for 3 marks. So if it says 3 marks, I know I'm not supposed to spend over 3 minutes solving this problem. This one is easy, no complications right here. I can either use the quadratic formula or I can factorize. So I'm going to be quick and factorize this one and find the solution. Factors of x squared are x and x because x times x will give us x squared. Two numbers that will give me 6 when I multiply them. What are those? But they must give me 5 when I add or subtract them. I'm going to have to use 6 and 1. Why? 6 times 1 is going to give me 6, and 6 minus 1 will give me 5. So the big number will follow the sign of the middle term, and this one will have to be positive. And then we can then agree with each other that therefore it means x is going to be negative 6 or x is going to be positive 1. If you're good at these, you start saving time on these kinds of things. They say 3 mark, you do it in 30 seconds, saving more and more time for the complicated questions that you're going to be dealing with. Right. 1.2, we're going to the second part now, which is 1.2. Let's go to 1.2. 1.2 says we've got 4x squared. It is added with 3x, and then they're subtracting 5, and this is apparently equal to 0. Now, the examiner has got a note here that says correct, right, to 2 decimal places. Now, this is a hint in a way. This is a hint that tells you that you cannot find the factors, right, by just looking at this by inspection, which means you need to use the quadratic formula. It's a hint. Sometimes they don't put it there. So if they are kind enough, they'll do exactly what they did on this question by telling you that this is actually, this can only be solved if you use the quadratic formula or by completing the square, which I don't advise you to do because it takes too much time. So I'm going to use the quadratic formula. I've got 4x squared plus 3x minus 5 equal to 0. So I'm going to start first of all collecting my variables. We know that our a value here is 4. We know our b value here is 3. And we know our c value here is not 5, but it is negative 5. Right. So if you go to the information sheet or the formula sheet and then you actually look up there, you'll find one of the formulas is the quadratic formula. Everybody knows this. Plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, right? Everything needs to be divided by 2a. Be careful of what you're doing there, right? Then there's a minus sign in the formula. I'm going to put that. I need something here. Plus minus the square root. I need something here. Squared. Minus 4. I need something, and I need something inside there. Everything needs to be divided by 2 times some number. So let's get those numbers. What is my b? My b value is 3. So I'm substituting 3 here. B is 3, so I'm substituting 3 here. That's b is going to help me to find what b squared is going to be. Please always put it inside the parentheses. That 3 squared is important for you to put it inside the brackets. Right. What is my a? My a value is 4. And what is my c? My c is negative 5. On the denominator, my a value is still 4, so I'm going to substitute 4 there. Then the rest is just calculator's work. Remember, a calculator is an instrument, not a monument, so you guys must actually use it. Right, fraction, and I've got a minus inside the bracket. I've got 3 because my b value is 3. And then after that, I'm just going to put inside the bracket plus or minus. You can't put both plus and minus, so you just put one of them. And then you've got a square root of, they've got 3 here squared, you've got minus 4. And then be careful not to make a mistake. Your a is 4 and your c value is actually negative 5. And then you close the bracket on the denominator. You've got 2 times something. What is something? Something is 4, right? And then if you press your equality sign, you get something very awesome, which is in surd form. But they said they want it in decimal form. So you press the SD button, it gives you 0.80, right? So my first x value, right? X is 0.80. Okay, cool. Let's go back and check if that is correct. Yes, it is. 0.80 is the first x value. Or the second x value is what you're going to get when you change the sign that you've got there from a plus. You use a different sign, which is a minus. So I'm going to use my arrows there. I'm pressing the arrow to the right. So I'm going to go and delete that plus and put a minus. When I press the equality sign, I'm getting a different answer, which is negative 1.55. So negative 1.55. And those are the 2 answers that you're getting from 1.2. Moving right along, let's go to 1.3. 1.3 quickly says 4x squared minus 1 is less than 0. So this one is an inequality, right? Inequalities, you solve them like you do when you're solving quadratic equations, but the only difference is how you conclude the answer. So 4x squared minus 1 is less than 0. What do I do? Well, I have to factorize first. This is what I call dots, difference of 2 squares. If you can't factorize this, we are just interested in what we call the critical values. You can use the quadratic formula to find the critical values, but I can actually factorize because 4 is a perfect square, it comes from 2. X squared is a perfect square, it comes from x. 1 is a perfect square, it comes from 1. So I've got 2x minus 1 and 2x added with 1 is less than 0. So that's the factorization that I'm getting from this. This is dots, difference of two squares. Right. Now from here, I'm going to get an answer. If this was not an inequality, if it was an equal sign, my x value was going to be a half, or the other x value was going to be minus a half, right? So these numbers that you're seeing here are not the solutions to the problem, but they are what we call the critical values. This is grade 11's work. This is why I always tell people, grade 12 is 70% grade 11's work. You can't survive grade 12 without a full understanding of what happened in grade 11, right? Now, after doing this, I'm now going to need a conclusion, a method of concluding this. You can use a timeline, you can use a table, or you can even use what I call the graph, quadratic function, right? So I'm going to use a graph, like I'm going to treat this as if it was a parabola, right? So I'm going to draw what I call the x-axis, that's the x-axis, and then I'm going to draw a parabola. Of course, this is going to be a smiling parabola because my a value there in front of x squared is positive. Since in front of x squared we've got a positive 4, so it means if I was drawing a parabola, my parabola was going to be a smiley face parabola. It's going to have arms facing up. Right. Now, what do we have where the parabola cuts the x-axis? Well, where it cuts the x-axis, we've got the critical values. On the left-hand side, you're obviously going to have minus half, and on the right-hand side, you're obviously going to have plus half, right? So what are we interested in, beautiful people? This is so easy, no complications. This sign says less than, right? This says less than. The sign, the inequality, says smaller, right? Smaller than 0. So what is smaller than 0? Anything that is smaller than 0 is what is negative. So smaller than 0, aka, not that aka, this aka, negative stuff. So we're looking for the parts where this graph is negative. Now we are in South Africa. We do things from left to right. So you're going to look at this from left to the right, right? Go anywhere. You can even use your finger. Put your finger on top of the graph, right? And run on top of the graph, right? Run literally on top of the graph. As you are running on top of the graph, find places where it satisfies whatever the inequality requires. So my inequality requires less than 0, which means where it's negative. Where will a graph be negative? A graph will be negative below the x-axis, because above the x-axis, the y values are positive, but below the x-axis, the y values are negative. So I'm looking for parts where the y values are negative, right? So I can even put that here and say to you, okay, let me use maybe white color, and I'll also use yellow color. So when I start from the left, I'm starting from the left, I'm going this way, right? Here at the top, my graph is positive here because it's above the x-axis. It is positive there, right? But below the x-axis, the graph is negative. So it's negative all the way here. This graph is negative, it's negative, it's negative, it's negative up to here. And then after that, it starts to be positive again because it just went beyond the x-axis, which means above the x-axis. What am I interested in? I'm interested in all those x values where this graph is negative, right? Which means if you agree with me, you will agree that it is from where x is negative a half until where x is positive a half. So my solution is going to be all x values, right? From minus 1 over 2 up to positive 1 over 2. Do I need to include those? No, I don't need to include those. Why? Because in the question, they were not included in the original question. It just said less than 0, not less or equal to. So I'm interested in the parts where the graph is negative. So those are these parts here. This is where I'm interested. So I'm interested in all those x values from here all the way, right? From here all the way up to that x value. Those x values between minus a half and a half. Please keep that in mind. Very powerful stuff indeed. So that will be the solution to this inequality. This is one of the most challenging parts in math, to be honest with you, because I don't know why, but for some odd reason, you guys struggle with the inequalities. So I hope this has opened up your mind somehow.